and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Productions channel here at YouTube, and this is Heavy Thrashhead, the guy who runs this channel. Of course, this is episode 12 in the Overrated or Underrated series. Now, this one's going to be a little different. Since the past episodes were all focused on obscure metal, here it's time to kind of focus a bit more on not mainstream bands, but that'll be probably a later one down the line. And I also kind of said this in the first episode where I can definitely do little spins on this series where I can also talk about some known metal bands. So here, I'm going to be talking about a lot more known metal bands, and within this box there's quite a bit of known metal band names in here, and most of these I have in my collection. So you're gonna see me, at least within this episode, probably go to my collection and just pull them out instead of just typing their name here on the bottom. So let's definitely waste no time. But before I do get into shaking the box up and pulling out names randomly while being with my eyes closed, let's definitely address the band that's playing in the background. This, of course, is a band I did talk about in my Overrated or Underrated series. This, of course, is Killer. Pretty known Belgian metal band, if anything. But this, of course, is the disc that has also the Wall of Sound album, because it just combines the two albums. They tend to get compared to Motorhead, which is a little definitely, similar to Motorhead in some ways, but it's not really a Motorhead clone. If anything, they probably are comparable to like Baron Rojo out of Spain. They're just a good band, though. That's all. Good band. I just felt like playing this. Alright, let's definitely get down to business. Wrong place open from. Okay, here we go. I just picked out a band name. Let's see what band this is. Let's see if I find this band overrated or underrated. Alright, this is a band I don't have, but I talked about them during USPM month. This is Obsession. I have to say, I think this band's underrated. Just right from there. Most of their albums I've heard, but at this point, I pretty much heard their whole entire discography going on YouTube also to listen to their last two releases. They're good. Of course, their best stuff is like, the Martial Law EP and Methods of Madness. Just a killer band, that's all. Just a killer band. I find them underrated. Right to the punch. But I don't have, the reason I don't have I don't have their stuff in my collection, the fact is, I think it's because of how it has to do with price. And I know that the Scarred for Life reissue from like 2002 isn't all that great, and I downloaded like an MP3 version of it, and it sounds like crap, if anything. The only thing that it's worth having for is the 2 bonus tracks, that's all. But obviously it's quite a fuck up, and therefore trying to track down an original LP pressing is a bitch, because the prices, they tend to be at least, at very high prices. As far as Methods of Madness goes, I don't know if the 2002 reissue is even worth getting, even though it's got 2 bonus tracks, but I don't know if the sound quality is that good. And the fucking 1998 CD reissue of the Martial Law EP fetches for wild prices on the internet. So there's your reason. But yet the other albums I still have to get around to. Those are quite easy to obtain. Alright, so now I'm going to shut up and go back in here and pull another band out. actually have stuff by this band, but this one will be quite almost a really obvious band, if anything, when I talked about them. I reviewed one of their recent albums this year. I think you probably noticed, but the band that I pulled out of that box is Anvil. A very, very known metal band, and probably could be stretching it to be mainstream, because they're definitely are pretty big recently, due to that the Story of Anvil documentary from like 2009 or 8, which of course was running on the heels of this album right here. This is 13. And I just showed Fortune Fire, and then Hope and Hell, and then the album that I did review this year, Anvil is Anvil. So, so the verdict is, do I find them overrated or do I find them underrated? It's quite mutual, if anything. If anything, it's like there's some albums that could be looked as overrated, and then there's some albums that can be looked as downright underrated. Like, for me, I can understand people probably, and the people on the Metal Archives that rate this album, I can understand why they would, because I don't think this album is really that good, to be quite honest. I think some of the stuff on here I find to be a little tired in some ways. It's like, sure, it's Anvil, they're like with AC/DC, but at the same time I find this sound to be quite not all that inspiring. Like, they really, like, Liv should have worked a bit more on some of the songs. Yet here we have an album such as this, which has probably 2 misfires, but yet this album, while being almost a little closer to their older writings, some of their earlier stuff, it's actually almost a stronger album, if you ask me, than Hope and Hell. Because again, there's actually some pretty good tracks on here. Sure, again, the 2 misfires, whatever. You either, it's, it's all subjective, but for me, I like this album, and I'm almost going to be on the verdict of saying that this album could be underrated. But as far as the band as a whole, they're like in between overrated and underrated, because of they get rated highly, but then they also get very rated lowly. So it's, I guess due to having more underrated albums, I guess that probably makes them underrated. But to some extent, I can understand why people would rate, would find them overrated. So you have that. So again, it's not really a straight answer, because it's kind of tough for me to really say if I really do find them, because there are some albums within the discography that I don't find to be all that great. But I think there are some albums within there that I do find to be quite underrated. They're not, it's like, their stuff can be quite solid, but then their stuff can be quite, I'm not going to try and point it down the lyrics. It's all have to do with the, at least the construction of the song. If it's at least, good, then that's, or I'll shut up. Definitely get back in for, who knows, maybe the last one. Here we go. Here's another band. I have this stuff by them, but I may have to go down here and get it. This is a band that Metal Theologian talked about in his overrated or underrated series. his episode actually. It's gotta be. Nah, it's not down here. Go to the other cabinet. Here we go. And I reviewed their album last year because they did release one last year. It's a new wave of British heavy metal band, and if you're watching this episode, you probably know. This, of course, is Satan. I'm gonna disagree in some ways to his thing, but at the same time, I can understand them being considered overrated. In some ways, they do get rated quite highly, but at the same time, the vast majority of people that rate them highly almost feel is quite low. If anything, it's probably, I would say, around 70%. I think that, then again, that's still quite high, actually, if you really think about it, that do rate them. But it's mostly people that really are into their, the people that are really into that obscure stuff that probably rate this band a lot more highly than the ones that are not so much into the obscure stuff. And then again, it's the people. It's definitely, for me, that's the best answer I can come up with that really probably rate them. Like the ones that are so into the new wave of British heavy metal are probably the ones that really rate this highly, but that's quite almost a low amount of people if you really think about it. But this sound does get rated quite highly though, and it's only just one album if you think about it. It's just one album that gets rated highly. And it's one of the reasons for why it led to reforming this lineup that recorded this album to record these two albums, Life Sentence and Atom by Atom. Because before this lineup and the lineup that after that recorded Court in the Act don't get rated as highly. If for some reason I don't think they get rated as highly when it comes to Satan. It's like you got the Kiss of Death single, which is which was actually my introduction to Satan to begin with. Those two songs I like, and then you got the, oh god, what's his name though? That sang on that single, I forget his name. I could just pull his name up on the computer, cause. God, here we go. And it's, Trevor Robinson. That's the guy who was singing on the Kiss of Death single, and then the demo that was released before the Kiss of Death single, which the demo did have the two tracks that would make up the Kiss of Death 7-inch. Those four tracks are good. Those are good, like Executioner. Yeah, the Executioner, Oppression. That whole entire demo could have just been released as an EP. If it was just released as a EP, it probably would be just a killer EP. It probably would have been ranked as probably one of the best new wave of British heavy metal EPs. But it's definitely good. And for like 1981, just by looking at the year that was released, it's like it's pretty heavy even for like 1981. But of course, you then after that you would end up getting Ian Swift, the guy who would end up replacing Brian Ross in Avenger to record the two Avenger albums. Of course, the other Avenger album that I have that was released in 2014. Which that demo would pretty much mix up the songs that would appear on the Court in the Act album that Brian Ross would take over for. But then after that, you then have the lineup that recorded the Suspended Sentence album, which, from the listens I have gave, I think that album's quite good. It's definitely more closer to what the band members would kind of do with Pariah, because Pariah is pretty much just Satan under a different name, just that the genre style was a bit more speed thrash, but still very new wave of British heavy metal influence. If anything, Pariah is just a more heavier version of Satan. But then, you got the lineup that recorded the Suspended Sentence album, and you got the lineup that recorded the demo and the Kiss of Death single. And then, those two eras technically take a back seat to the Brian Ross era, if anything. And so in some way, I can see that as being very overrated. But as a whole, for me, I think they're a little bit underrated in some ways, but that's just my opinion, just my one opinion. So yeah, Satan, I find them to some extent a little underrated, but not too underrated. But as far as that, I almost think that their stuff is at least a little better than some of Iron Maiden's recent albums, especially for an album that is titled The Book of Souls. Yeah. Me, I would take any Satan album over any of Iron Maiden's recent albums. That's just how I am. So I think Iron Maiden are just getting a bit too boring these days. But that's left for another discussion. That's just left. Maybe when I talk about mainstream metal bands within the Overrated, Underrated series, when I would really give my full disclosure on what I really do think of Iron Maiden. So, if you have heard of these bands, which of course you have, definitely post your thoughts down below, and you could definitely say if you find them overrated or underrated. So, until then, this is Heavy Thrash saying I'm out, and I hope you enjoyed this, this episode. Later.